So I'm involved in finding books that, again, it's 16, 17, 1800s, that have a certain character, biblical Christian worldview theme. These themes for these books have to be based on 4 particular scriptures. One of them is Romans chapter 4, verses 18 through 21, where Abraham, in hope against hope, he was fully convinced that God would do as he promised. Now, that is really essential for all of us to understand, because we're all going to be placed in situations in life where it's going to be hopeless, where you don't see it tomorrow. Have you ever been in a hopeless situation?
I've certainly felt that way, and I think most people have as well, yeah.
Especially when you're married, have children, you're going to be in situations that you feel like are insurmountable. And so what I love about that verse is because it is dependent. I'm reading a book right now called Surfing for God. And by the way, leaders are readers and readers are leaders. If leaders, Christian leaders are not going to be reading, they're going to die. They're not going to be used greatly by God. So we have to always be on the cutting edge of.
Just as a little side note, pretty much any time I've ever encountered Dr. Hamby, he's always clutching a book that he says has totally transformed and changed his life. So I'm interested to see what this book is right here. This one.
Yeah, this one's called Surfing for God.
Okay.
Discovering the Divine Desire Beneath Sexual Struggles. By Cusick. It is one of the most life-changing books I've read in this year. Listen to this.
Okay, share why.
What would you like me to do?
Oh, please share why it's so life-changing.
I'm going to, and I'm going to tell you in the context of Romans chapter 4 in the books that we publish, and why this book in particular is so life-changing to me. I could probably just quote it. Let's see if I can find it here. He says, well, this is an interesting quote. Self-deception is one of the chief characteristics of addiction.
Self-deception. That's interesting. I take it, though, everything you've learned in this book is something ultimately that you've been building upon, something that you've over time. So
not only have I built upon it, but I've had to struggle through these same issues myself. Everyone struggles through the issues of wanting to be accepted. Sure. We all have a God void hole in our lives that has to be filled by God himself. And if it's filled with anything else, then the pleasures that we embark on, then those pleasures will lead to addictions. Those pleasures are unsustainable. Those pleasures, you see, if you follow pleasure first, that's what many men do. They're following after pleasure. And what happens is they seek after those pleasures, and once they find them and they enjoy them, those pleasures steal from us. They never give us satisfaction and fulfillment. They give us satisfaction at the moment, but later they rob us. That's Proverbs chapter 5 teaches us that.
So one thing I've observed in the teaching community, the Christian community, is that they do advise against doing X, Y, and Z, but very rarely do you find a wise person or a wise teacher that can explain how you can build yourself to be resistant to these bad outcomes. Do you have any insight to share there?
There's only one way, and that is to remain intoxicated.
Oh, that's interesting. Never heard that it phrased that way before. Care to explain what you mean by that?
I sure do. Yeah, please don't share. Don't cut me off at that point. Wisdom from Dr. Mark Hamby: remain intoxicated. No, Proverbs chapters 5 and 6 lead us to the understanding. Chapters 4, 5, and 6 lead us to the understanding that if you're intoxicated with the love of the wife of your youth, then the other pleasures that are offered to you, they will not be tempting. They will not be temptations any longer, because you will look at them as something less. You never, once you taste and see that God is good, once you taste and experience the pleasures of God, then the passing pleasures of what the world has to offer, they don't entice anymore. They don't invite anymore, because you look at them and like, why would I want to do that? I mean, like, for example, I'm with a lot of different groups, and when I'm with the group of Christians that really love the Lord, love His Word, we could talk freely about the sins that we're dealing with. It's iron sharpening iron. I enjoy those groups. But when I'm in a carnal group of Christians and they want to enjoy alcohol, and I've always noticed this, they need alcohol to self-medicate themselves so they can enjoy each other. And and usually the conversation is never inclusive of God. The conversation is about the world, about the things that they're involved in. It's about having a good time.
I hate to be so negative, but to be quite frank, I wish that the limit was alcohol. It's usually substances that are much more destructive than alcohol, at least in my settings. So
that's true, and it's getting worse in the Christian settings as well. But here's the quote. Now again, back to Romans chapter 4. Abraham, in hope against hope, was fully convinced that God would keep His promises. Okay. Mm-hmm. In hope against hope. I love that.
In hope against hope.
Oswald Chambers claimed that all sin is rooted in the suspicion that God is not really good.
Interesting. That's something to wrap your mind around right there.
I believe that is the root cause of most sin.
Interesting. So to the person watching who is a doubter or maybe even not a Christian, what would you say to them when they don't really have an understanding of what is God? How can they?
God says, if you seek me with all your heart, I'll let you find me. God says, test me and I'll open up the storehouse of heaven. And God says that I'm a sun and shield. I give grace and glory. I will withhold no good things from them who walk uprightly. God is a God. He says, I will make known unto you the path of life. Listen to this. Psalm 16:11. I'll make known unto you the path of life. In my presence, that's the key. We're in the presence of everything else, but we're not in the presence of God. God is the God of the universe, the God of all creation. He created us because He loved us. He created us because He wanted to enjoy us. And here's part of the problem. John Piper wrote a book about 20 years ago called Desiring God. Yeah. And in his book, he wrote that the chief end of man is to glorify God by enjoying Him forever. He changed the Westminster Confession to and join Him, from and join Him forever to by join Him forever. And so literally that one sentence in a split second of time changed the course of my entire life.
Really? Literally one word from one sentence.
Yep, one word from one sentence. I'm like,
could you describe you before and after, what you were like and how you changed?
Before I was adhering to commandments. Before I was adhering to a set of rules. Before I was striving to please God. Before I was doing everything that I could to make sure that the people, my authorities, found, they found, me as a good person, a hard worker, and all of a sudden, within an instant of time, I realized that I was working for men, not for God. Not only was I not working for God, but I was not working for the pleasure of God. And it's like, when you're working with somebody and they take pleasure in what you do, and I mean, literally, there are times when I'm out in the woods building ponds and waterfalls and planting trees, and I get it done, and you put that last shovelful of dirt in there, and you look at the person that's working with you, I just reach up and like high five them, The other day I was working in the woods with Trey, and we looked back at our accomplishment over the last year of building these beautiful ponds and waterfalls. And we were like, this is amazing. We just love this. There's a sense of fulfillment and pleasure. So the chief end of man is to glorify God by enjoying Him forever. And all of a sudden, as I started realizing that God created me to enjoy me, He created me so that I could enjoy Him, that changed something, because I realized that there was a part of God I misunderstood, a part of God I didn't know. That God truly, when I create something, what do I want to do with my creation? I created these waterfalls, these ponds, this forest, these paths. What do I want to do with my creation? I want to enjoy it. You know what I did to enjoy it?
Sure.
I put fish in them. I put trout in the upper pond. I put bluegills and all those orange ones with the stripe on their side. What are they?
Clownfish?
No. Find them in the lakes. No. You can eat them.
Okay.
No, it's important. I want to know what kind of fish I'm going to eat. Perch.
Oh, perch. Okay, perch.
Perch. And then in the lower pond, I put catfish. I love tacos with catfish. It's the best, okay? So not only did I create these ponds that are bringing me pleasure, but guess what? My 88-year-old mom and her twin sister, who happens to be 88 years old herself, I'm bringing them up next week to go fishing.
There you go.
They are going to have a blast.
For a whole 5 minutes of your time, you're going to really spend that much time going out and having fun, enjoying it with people. 5 minutes?
Last week I was up there cooking breakfast.
Oh, wow.
Up in the woods. Scrambled eggs, cheese with the eggs, a little bit of cilantro. I had some eggplant. I had zucchini. I had garlic. I had onions. And I'm out there in the woods. And you know what I was doing?
On top of all this?
Guess what I was doing when I started cooking all of this? It was just me and God. Guess what I was doing? I was laughing so hard because it was like, this is incredible. God, this is just incredible. Thank you so much. I can't believe I'm like, Lord, do you realize what you've given me? And it's like, this is incredible. That's intoxication. When you're intoxicated with the love of Christ, there is nothing that this earth has to offer that is going to entice you to leave that kind of love and pleasure. So when you seek after pleasure first, it restricts, binds, and addicts. But when you seek after God, pleasure always follows.
So the subtext behind all of this is a lot of industry. I mean, that sounds like a lot of work, not only just filling up the pond, but doing all this work. And obviously the reward sounds really terrific. What do you have to say for the people that don't like intoxication of God? What does that even mean? It sounds like a lot of work to get to this goal I don't really understand. Okay, what do you say to those people?
Okay, good question. Okay, first of all, back to Oswald Chambers' quote, that the root issue is that we do not really believe that God is good. We have a suspicion that if God is good, then why all the suffering? If God is good, then why does a child die? If God is good, then why do I have this problem? Why is my husband turned out to be a homosexual? You know, all these different things that can happen in life. So we got to understand that. I remember talking to a person who brought all these points up, and he said to me, he had cancer and he was dying. He was going to die within a couple weeks, and he said to me, I'd rather be in hell than to be in heaven with a God like that. And I said to him, you're blaming the wrong person. He goes, what do you mean? I said, this is not a result of God. This is a result of his creatures. Number one that was cast out of heaven with a legion of angels with him, who is corrupting the earth. This is the result of sin in the human race because they sought not to believe that God was good. Satan, the very first thing that he said to Eve was, did God really say this? God knows that in the day that you eat it, you will not die. So there's always a suspicion on God's character, and we blame God for the things that man and Satan are responsible for. And so if we could just kind of like get that God has our best interest in mind all the time. I mean, he wants us to enjoy life. Jesus said, I've come to give you life and to give it to you more abundantly. And so that when you're intoxicated with that kind of love, when I first met my wife, I was at a state university. There are girls walking everywhere around me,
Gasp, as girls often do.
All kinds of temptations with all of
Oh,
these other young women, beautiful young women in the campus. You want to know something? I saw none of them. There was nothing out there that attracted me because I was so intoxicated with the love of the wife of my youth, okay, that all I could think about was her. I couldn't wait to be with her. And so we got to now take that same truth, and now we fall in love with Christ, and so Romans chapter 4 again, Abraham was fully convinced that even though he was in a hopeless state, that God would keep his promises, which brings us now to Romans chapter 5. You asked me, why is character so important and what do I look for? Well, he says that now you can rejoice in your sufferings. It's like, really? Who's going to rejoice in their sufferings?
right.
If you believe that God is good and he has your best interest in mind, that he wants to fill you with pleasures. He says, I will make known unto you the path of life. In my presence is fullness of joy. At my right hand are pleasures forevermore. I don't think people have experienced those kinds of pleasures. Alex, I will tell you right now, in 42 years of knowing Jesus Christ, the pleasures that God has allowed me to experience are beyond imagination. I mean, I'm like, I can't even drink it all in. It's crazy, the things that God has for his children if we walk in obedience. Now, that doesn't mean that I've lived the kind of life that I'm not trying to set myself up as some hero here. And God has disciplined me often. Whom the Lord loves, he disciplines. And God has spanked me twice. And boy, I do not want to get spanked by him again. Okay.
Three's a charm. Hey,